Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. That was weird. Thanks for watching. That's better. This is lesson 1 of my Learn to Knit course, finger quotes there. I have been throwing around the idea of doing this for a while now, and I've been putting it off mostly because the idea of hearing my own voice on a recording is super cringy. But if I'm going to do it, quarantine seems like the right time. So the first project we're going to do is a plain old boring dishcloth. The reality is the end product is going to be really wonky and probably not very pretty, so it may as well be practical. And it is nice to be able to have something to look back at and see your progression if you decide to keep going with knitting as a hobby. So I'm going to put a link to the pattern and the supplies you're going to need. All PDFs you can just download. The pattern is the instructions for how to make it if you decide you want to go for round 2 without watching the video. You should have enough yarn left to make another one. The stores may be closed, but Joanne is doing buy online and pick up curbside, so you should be able to get everything you need. We're going to be using Lily Sugar and Cream Cotton Yarn. I'm using color Potpourri. There's a bunch of different brands, so just make sure you get a number 4 weight cotton yarn. Next up is needles. You're going to need size number 7 or 4.5 millimeter single point needles. So just make sure it's got those stops on the end. I prefer wood or bamboo because they grip nice. The bamboo ones are pretty light. Plastic ones are very slippery, and metal is really loud and clacky. But you do you, boo. You're also going to need a tape measure, a pair of scissors, and a yarn needle. Yarn needles have a bigger eye than regular sewing needles. Casting on is the term used for getting those starting loops on the needle. I'm going to show you how to do 2 different cast-ons, the knitted cast-on and the crochet cast-on. So if there are any crocheters out there, you can go ahead and grab a number 7 4.5 millimeter crochet hook if you like. First up is the knitted cast-on. I have a fancy winder that turns my yarn into what's called a cake, but you can leave yours as is, wind it into a ball, whichever is fine. To start, you need to make a slip knot, so make a finger gun with your left hand. The yarn leading to the ball should go down your hand, while the tail will be up by your fingers. So grab that tail and loop it over to make a loose X. Hold the X with your left thumb, and then pull the top of that tail through the loop that's around your finger. Pull just enough so you have a little lasso. You can use 2 fingers if you're having trouble. Tug it tight, and there's your slip knot. That's going to be your very first stitch. So go ahead and plunk it on your needle. Make sure the tail is in the back and the yarn leading to the ball or the working yarn is in the front. Pull it tight. The needle holding your new stitches stays in your left hand, and the needle in your right hand is going to make those new stitches. So from left to right, bring the needle through that first loop so that the needles make an X. Bring that working yarn around the back of the right needle to the front, counterclockwise. You want to slide that right needle down, hooking that yarn you just crossed over and bringing it through that loop. Loosen it up enough to plunk on your needle and then pull it tight. You just made your second stitch. So again, from left to right, bring the needle through that first loop so that the needles make an X. Bring the working yarn around the back of the right needle to the front. Slide that right needle down, hooking the yarn you just crossed over and bringing it through the loop. Loosen it up enough to plunk on your needle and then pull it tight. There's a little kids rhyme you can do as you go. So it's in through the front door, once around the back, peek through the window, off jumps Jack. Hey, whatever works. So keep going until you have 35 stitches on the left needle. You want to try and keep an even tension with this. If you're having trouble getting the needle in to make the X, loosen it up a little bit. If you've got stitches sliding all over the place, tighten it up. You'll get a feel for it as you go. So again, in through the front door, once around the back, peek through the window, off jumps Jack. So if you've knitted before and are sitting there thinking that this idiot is teaching the cast on incorrectly, you're absolutely right. I have taught a lot of people how to knit before, and the twist always throws them off the first time. If you haven't knitted before and have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. It's a cliffhanger. You'll find out next episode. You are all set once you have 35 stitches. The next part of this video is going to be the crochet cast on. You can use whatever method you like. For this project, it really doesn't matter which you choose. Alrighty, it's the crocheter's turn. This is the crochet cast on now. So you're gonna go ahead and make your slip knot. And then you're going to chain 34. So that last loop on your hook is going to become your first knit stitch. So go ahead and put it on the needle. Make sure the working yarn is in the back. Now what you're going to do is take that second needle and you're going to pick up the bump on the back of the first chain. So go in from the front to the back. Now bring that right hand needle from left to right through that loop so that the needles make an X. Bring the working yarn around the back of the right needle to the front counterclockwise. Slide that right needle down, hooking that yarn you just crossed over and bringing it through the loop. Go ahead and slide that new stitch off of the left needle. You just made your second stitch. So again, pick up the bump on the back of the next chain from left to right, bring that needle through the first loop so that the needles make an X. Bring that working yarn around the back of the right needle to the front, slide that right needle down, hooking the yarn you just crossed over and bringing it through the loop. Slide it off. So this is a little kid's rhyme you can do as you go. It's in through the front door, once around the back, peek through the window, off jumps Jack. Okay, whatever works. You're going to keep going until you have 35 stitches on the right needle and 0 stitches left in your chain. So in through the front door, once around the back, peek through the window, off jumps Jack. Try and keep an even tension with this. If you're having trouble getting the needle in to make the X, loosen up a bit as you go. If you've got stitches sliding all over the place, tighten it up. You'll get a feel for it as you go. So this is actually my favorite cast on method. It just gives a really nice clean edge. I've been literally knitting for over 20 years, and whenever I do the knitted cast on, my stitches look super uneven. I don't get it, but whatever, I'm over it. You are all set once you have 35 stitches. You can use whatever cast on method you'd like for this project. It really doesn't matter what you choose. Alrighty, let's start knitting. And hey, good news, you already know how to. So the needle with your fancy new stitches goes in your left hand. You're going to bring that right needle from left to right through that first loop so that the needles make an X. Bring that working yarn, not the tail, around the back of the right needle to the front, counterclockwise. Slide the right needle down, hooking that yarn you just crossed over and bring it through the loop. Go ahead and slide off that new stitch. Deja vu. Or if you liked the kids rhyme, you can always go with in through the front door, once around the back, peek through the window, and off jumps Jack. So like I said in the beginning, this is not going to look perfect. Your main goal with this project is evening out what's called your tension, making your stitches look nice and even. If you're having trouble getting the needle into the loops, loosen up. If your stitches are loosey-goosey, tighten them up. You'll have a literal line in your dishcloth where you'll be able to see the change in progress when you really start to get it. So keep on going down the row. You got this. So when you get to the end, all you're going to do is turn your work. You'll be looking at the reverse side. And then you start over. Bring that right hand needle from left to right through the first loop so the needles make an X. You can go ahead and tighten up the working yarn a little bit to even out the edge. Working yarn goes around the back of the right needle to the front. Slide your right needle down, hook in that yarn and bring it through the loop. Slide it off the left needle. In through the front door, once around the back, peek through the window, off jumps Jack. So cotton yarn is nice to start with because it's very grippy, but it can split. So keep an eye on that as you go. Make sure you snag that whole piece of yarn, that you're not shoving your needle into the middle of the strand and splitting it, because that's not good. That's how you end up with extra stitches. So we're not going to count rows today. Keep on going until you have a square or whatever shape it turns out to be, but just make sure that the length equals the width. So go slow, pay attention, don't stress, you will make mistakes, and don't worry, the next section goes over how to fix your screw-ups. So I put times where each section starts in the description, so rewind as much as you need to. At the end of each row, check to make sure that you still have 35 stitches, especially in the beginning. If you don't, you can always adjust it on your next row. Alrighty, so you can see I'm most of the way through mine. What we've been doing is called the garter stitch. That's when you knit every stitch of every row. So congrats, you're halfway there. There's 2 stitches in knitting, the knit stitch and the purl stitch. All those beautiful designs you see out there in the world are basically combinations of the two with some tricks thrown in. So let's talk about what happens when you no longer have 35 stitches on your needle. Less is bad. That means you possibly dropped a stitch somewhere along the way. If you have a dropped stitch floating around, that means that all of your hard work is probably going to unravel. So I purposely dropped a stitch a couple of rows back. I'm going to go get it. Okay, so you're going to look for any open loops and knit up to it. You'll be able to tell when you get to it. There should be a little run or a gap there. So if you have a crochet hook, go ahead and grab that. Otherwise, you can use your yarn needle or even the tip of one of your knitting needles. So you're going to go ahead and grab that loose loop. It should just look like a raw stitch that's not on your needle. So you're going to pull that loose loop up, pull it up a row, and there should be what looks like a ladder rung there. You're going to pull that ladder rung through your runaway stitch. So depending on how many rows back it went, you might have to do this a couple of times to get to your current row. If you have to do it more than once, that ladder rung you pulled through, that's going to be your new dropped, air quotes, dropped stitch. So once you're all cut up, you're just going to go ahead and pop that stitch onto your left hand needle. And then you're just going to knit it like normal and go on your merry way. So if you don't see any drop stitches anywhere, you can just make an increase. So knit the next stitch like normal, but don't slide it off the needle. Instead, you're going to swing that right hand needle around and insert it into the back of the stitch from right to left, and then knit it again. So you'll have 2 new stitches on the right hand needle instead of just 1. So go ahead and slide them both off. So if you end up having too many stitches and you need to decrease, you can just knit 2 stitches together. So when you go to insert the needle from the left to the right to make that X, insert it into 2 loops instead of 1, and then you just knit like normal. Easy peasy. Try to position your increases and decreases if you have to do them in the middle of the row. It's very noticeable if you do them in the first or the last stitch, so try and keep them in the middle. So if you come across any cuts in the yarn where there's a knot tying the 2 ends together, cut that whole thing out. Let the loose end hang, and then when you insert the needle to make your X, loop the new piece over. So the tail will be on the left and the working yarn will be on the right. It's going to be loose and slide around as you knit, but you should be able to complete the rest of your knit stitch normally. Let the 2 tails hang out in the back for a few rows, and then you just tighten them to fit in with the rest of the stitches in the row later on. Tie a double knot to secure them and you're good to go. Those are going to be the main mistakes you'll make. If you've invented a new one or have absolutely no idea what you did, leave a comment, email me a picture. We'll see what we can do. So you know you're almost finished when you've got yourself a, hopefully, square piece in front of you. But now it's time to get those stitches off the needle, or bind off as it's called. So you're going to knit those first 2 stitches normally. Then holding the working yarn tightly, you're going to pick up that first stitch and drop it up and over the second stitch and completely off the needle. Then knit the next stitch. And then same thing, pick up the rightmost stitch, lift it up and over the one on the left, and drop it off the needle. Knit the next stitch. And that's it. Keep going, making sure you've only ever got 2 stitches on that right hand needle. A nice braided edge is going to start to form with the bound off stitches, and then you just stop once you have 1 stitch left. Okay, so when you get to the end, snip that yarn, leaving a 6-inch or so tail, and then pull it through the final loop on your needle and tug it tight. And now we get to weave in those yarn ends. So grab that needle and thread it. And then you're going to weave it into one of the nearby ridges or one of the stitches that you made. And just work your way down the row for 5 or so stitches, just weaving in and out. And then go down into the next row below it and work your way back through that row for a couple of stitches. This just locks the ends in for extra security, and it makes it look a little nicer than just cutting the tail at the knot. And then just snip the tail, leaving a 1/2 inch or so. Don't forget to weave in any other ends you might have swinging around. I like to wash and dry the item before completely trimming those tails so the yarn loosens up. And okie dokie, I guess that's it. Hey, thanks!